the whole conclusion to my book is that why would you take someone like Epstein down? You don't need people like him anymore to compromise people, because all of our lives are increasingly online. So if they want something on you, they can just harvest it off through, whether it's, Palantir, it ends up in your Palantir database. Basically, it's sucked up by the NSA or GCHQ or any of these other agencies. And you're profiled based on it. Or if there isn't incriminating stuff, they can plant incriminating stuff on your devices.
So you're screwed either way.
If they want to screw you, sure. Yeah. And so it's much easier to consolidate power under those circumstances.
Why was Jeffrey Epstein really taken down? According to Whitney Webb, the answer is chilling. He simply wasn't needed anymore. In an era where every detail of our lives is vacuumed into sprawling databases, compromising people has become effortless. There's no need for elaborate blackmail operations when your texts, your searches, even your private moments can be scraped, profiled, and weaponized at will. And if nothing incriminating is found, Webb warns, it can just as easily be fabricated and planted. Innocence doesn't matter in a system designed to make everyone vulnerable. This is how true power consolidates. When leaders no longer need intermediaries to keep others in line, when compromise and leverage become automated, the tools of control shift from backrooms to algorithms. In this new order, political figures, business elites, and even everyday citizens can all be managed by the same invisible infrastructure. What Epstein once did for a network of intelligence operatives and billionaires, the machine now does at scale. The disturbing part is not just the technology itself, but the intent behind it. Whitney Webb argues that mass surveillance is not about catching terrorists or criminals. That's just the cover story. It's about shaping a society where obedience is enforced by fear of exposure. The blackmail operations of the past were crude compared to this. Now the system doesn't just neutralize threats, it preempts them. Whitney Webb is one of the most relentless investigative journalists of our time. In her research, she has traced how intelligence agencies, tech billionaires, and compromised political leaders have converged to build an architecture of control more comprehensive than anything humanity has seen. And tonight, she reveals not just how this system works, but how deeply it has already embedded itself into our daily lives. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because what Webb uncovers next, from secretive surveillance programs to the elites who profit from them, will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about freedom in the digital age. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
I would argue that neoconservatives have very successfully rebranded, and I think Peter Thiel is a very important example of that. So Peter Thiel, as an example, Palantir has been in the news, right? He's a co-founder of that. So how was Palantir created? Well, there was this company that was being run, or not company, sorry. It was a government program after 9/11 called Total Information Awareness. It was housed within the Pentagon's DARPA office. And the man they chose to put in charge of that was John Poindexter, who was the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration to be indicted for his role in Iran-Contra, which, again, the continuity of government stuff is relevant here. So eventually, it launches and whatever, but people are outraged by it because, as they rightly pointed out, it would eliminate constitutional protections of Americans' rights, specifically the right to privacy, among other things. It was a huge surveillance dragnet, and its goal wasn't just to, surveil everything. It was to predict crime before it happens, predict terror attacks before it happens. I mean, it's like Minority Report was basically the end goal of it. And so after all the pushback, they changed the name to Terrorist Information Awareness and try and rebrand. Oh, it's not total. We are still going to surveil innocent Americans, but we're focusing on the terrorists. They did all this stuff to try and rebrand it, but Congress defunded it. But hidden in that bill, Congress allowed aspects of it to continue. And essentially, I argue in my work on Palantir that an effort was made to privatize large aspects of TIA as Palantir. Because when Alex Karp and Peter Thiel were setting it up, they went to John Poindexter through this guy named Richard Pearl, who was a long-standing neocon actor with very extensive ties also to the state of Israel. He was like caught in the 70s giving classified information to Israel's embassy and should have gone to jail and somehow did not. And had a lot of ties also to Netanyahu's first government. And Richard Pearl is the guy that connected Teal Carp to Poindexter, and they basically wanted to talk to Poindexter because they wanted to recreate total information awareness and saw him as the godfather of modern mass surveillance. And in doing so, they basically, Peter Thiel teams up with In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital firm. Alex Karp has said on record that the intended clients of Palantir from the beginning was the CIA. And, the CIA was their first client for their first 6 years as a company. Their top developers went to Langley, Virginia, which is CIA headquarters, every 2 weeks to show the CIA their product and have them tweak it to their liking. And during that period of time, one of the top people at the CIA that would have been involved in that is this guy named Alan Wade, who was also intimately involved with total information awareness. And if you look at how total information awareness was described, its privacy protections, it's exactly the same as the way Palantir sold their stuff later on. So there's an insane amount of overlap. And what's crazy here is that Alan Wade, a few years prior, had created a Homeland Security software program that was also pre-crime-esque and similar to what Palantir ended up doing. It was called Kiliad, and he teamed up with Christine Maxwell to do that. It's about pre-crime. It's about predicting stuff before it happens. And that's what I think a lot of people miss about Palantir, because a lot of people say about mass surveillance, well, I have nothing to hide. But it's not about if you're doing something wrong now or not. It's about an algorithm thinking if you will do something wrong in the future. Well, the problem is that pre-crime has been inching along, and actually a lot of people in Epstein world, obviously Peter Thiel and Epstein had a relationship. More came out about this earlier this year after, Thiel kind of tried to minimize his ties a few months earlier. But Peter Thiel's Founders Fund co-invested in this company with Epstein and Wexner and Ehud Barak called Carbine, that basically had a pre-crime component to it. And Carbine has now colonized an insane amount of 911 emergency call services systems like throughout the U.S. and are the main company at the forefront. If this legislation in the U.S. is passed, it's called Next Generation or NG 911, where they're going to basically federalize and centralize all 911 emergency call systems. And then when you centralize it, you can just put one company in charge. They've changed the board a lot since the Epstein scandal because Ehud Barak was the chair and there were people on the board that were tied to Epstein, including a woman that he allegedly took to the UK to sort of soften up some US senators whose identity is still unknown before the Iraq war vote. But it's a story for another time. And, some other figures tied to Epstein were on the board, and it would formerly been created by veterans of Israeli intelligence. But now they only have one of the Israeli intelligence co-founders on the board. The others have left to do other things. One of them now works for Eric Prince, I believe. And they've kind of gone their separate ways, and they've tried to rebrand as a more American-looking company, I guess. I think they added Trump's former head of DHS, Christy Nielsen, I think is her name, to the board, and they have Michael Chertoff, the former one of the early heads of DHS under Bush. So
it's like so everything and everyone is captured, and everything is corrupt. Are they really good
I think that's kind of a simplification. I think not everything has always been like that. I think this particular group, once they got their hands on power, it's a faction. They've been consolidating control for a long time. And I think the advent of technology, big tech sort of taking over our lives, has really facilitated that. Because the whole conclusion to my book is that why would you take someone like Epstein down? You don't need people like him anymore to compromise people, because all of our lives are increasingly online. So if they want something on you, they can just harvest it off through, whether it's, Palantir, it ends up in your Palantir database. Basically, it's sucked up by the NSA or GCHQ or any of these other agencies. and you're profiled based on it. Or if there isn't incriminating stuff, they can plant incriminating stuff on your devices.
So you're screwed either way.
If they want to screw you, I mean, sure. Yeah. And so it's much easier to consolidate power under those circumstances.
Do you think there are...
And they elevate people who are compromised to positions of power. How did a guy like Dennis Hastert become Speaker of the House of the United States when it was known that he was a pedophile years before getting to that position? Because they can hold it over his head the whole time.
Webb points to the origins of Palantir, co-founded by Peter Thiel, as a prime example. What was once a Pentagon program called Total Information Awareness, a project so invasive Congress was forced to shut it down, quietly re-emerged in the private sector. Under Palantir, its DNA lived on, nurtured by venture capital tied to the CIA and developed in close collaboration with intelligence officials. The supposed goal was security. The real effect was something far more dangerous. A predictive surveillance apparatus capable of deciding, through data and algorithms, who might be a threat before they ever act. But surveillance alone wasn't enough. Webb connects the dots between this privatized intelligence industry and the same networks of corruption tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Palantir, Founders Fund, Carbine, intelligence veterans, and even emergency systems like 911 became intertwined with figures whose histories were already stained by blackmail and manipulation. The technology of control wasn't just evolving in the shadows, it was being woven directly into the infrastructure of government and society.
Do you think there are a lot of Epsteins operated?
Well, yeah, my whole book is about how Epstein was not an anomaly. You know, I mentioned the example of Adnan Khashoggi, but I mentioned Robert Keith Gray, who Robert Maxwell hired when he came, to the U.S. And made his big entry into New York City. He was also involved in sex blackmail stuff. There was a page boy scandal he was related to in the 1980s, where I forget the guy's name. I think Larry Craig was the name of the main congressman or senator involved. And Craig denied all the charges, but then got caught in the early 2000s for soliciting, sex in a bathroom in an airport or something like that. But there's been a ton of these scandals over the years. And then you have figures like Roy Cohn, who I mentioned earlier, involved in sex blackmail activities as well. There's a lot of these figures.
Sex blackmail seems to become very useful.
Well, it is, because, this is one of those things that's a holdover from the mob that later gets absorbed by intelligence agencies because they see its utility.
So if we see someone rich, famous,
knowing knowing information, the sexual blackmail information, the CIA, that's intelligence to them. We want to gather intelligence on these people and then use it to our benefit for national security interests. It's obviously other things too. I've thought about, I understand that my books are like a lot of information, but the thing is, we're never going to get an affidavit from the CIA being like, yes, we did bad things. Like, we've known they've done bad things in various decades. It's been very documented, and they won't admit to bad things there in almost every one of those cases. So it's like, you're not going to get that about Epstein or about anybody else,
So why do you think Epstein became almost like the central figure for all of this corrupt global elite meta cartel?
Well, he's just a microcosm of it, really. But I think
is it his own
he became too exposed, I think, especially after his first arrest. And as he described it, he became radioactive. But he had, before been able to move through all these different circles, with impunity, and was a well-respected guy in these elite circles, right? He was useful to a lot of people, mainly for money things, but also for, other more illegal things from, what we know about the case as it's developed. So I think since then, I don't know, he tried to rebrand as like a tech entrepreneur and all this stuff, but he was allegedly still cultivating important relationships. He was reportedly advising Tesla on how to take Tesla private. He claimed to be advising Treasury on the Department of Treasury on cryptocurrency and anti-hacking efforts. All sorts of, he was still doing a lot of stuff between those arrests. It's just, the public association was, no longer beneficial for a lot of powerful people.
But he was considered financially illiterate.
By who?
Well, I think Eric Weinstein came out and said he's a moron.
Yeah. That's interesting. Doesn't he work for Teal Capital? Well, Eric, I'm not super familiar with Eric Weinstein's Epstein story, but as I understand it, he talks a lot more about his impressions of Epstein at the meeting as opposed to why he was going there. And I believe he ran a hedge fund at the time. So why would you be going to Epstein as a hedge fund guy? I don't know.
Well, it seems like everybody met with Epstein at once.
Yeah, for financial stuff. But I do not believe that he was financially illiterate. He was very successful. He would not have been tapped in the 80s by people like Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese if he was not savvy. He helped orchestrate one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history, Towers Financial, but his name got dropped from the case like 3 months in. So, I mean, how do you do that by being financially illiterate? Why would Leslie Wexner give you power of attorney over all of his affairs?
Well, that is also very weird, though.
But would he do that for someone who's financially illiterate? Because Epstein had several years between 1987 or 1985, depending on who you believe, when the introduction was made.
But why give it to him anyway?
Well, obviously, Wexner liked Epstein very much. I think there's no questions there. So there's this murder of Wexner's tax attorney.
Yeah.
And then not long after that, Epstein comes into Wexner's world and untangles his tangled finances, whatever that means. And Epstein during that time, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by like very fancy, like aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think that is, it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade. That narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing, in his early history, for example.
If Webb is correct, we are no longer talking about surveillance in the way most people imagine it. This isn't just about snooping on your phone calls or scanning your emails. It's about constructing a digital cage where the possibility of resistance shrinks with every passing year. Leaders and institutions can now rule with a kind of precision control that past regimes could only dream of. They don't need to rely on secrecy, blackmail, or even brute force. The architecture itself ensures compliance. Think about the implications. Entire populations living under a system where innocent until proven guilty no longer exists. Where predictive policing assumes guilt before innocence, and where algorithms quietly determine who rises, who falls, and who disappears into silence. It's a shift in power so profound it threatens to redefine what justice, freedom, and even truth mean in the modern age. History gives us parallels. Empires and authoritarian states that built elaborate surveillance and control systems to keep their citizens in line. But never before has technology allowed this control to extend so far, so fast, and with so little resistance. What once required armies of informants now happens automatically. And once society normalizes it, rolling it back may be impossible. Whitney Webb's conclusion is stark. We don't need an Epstein figure anymore because the system itself has become Epstein. A machine of compromise, control, and coercion operating in the open, under the banner of safety and innovation. Whitney is not the only one echoing these warnings. David Icke, another brilliant investigative journalist, has issued a stark warning in a recent tweet. It reads, "He's playing you like the string section." You don't become a multi-billionaire with massive government contracts, including from the Pentagon and intelligence agencies, if you are not serving the system. You are not a mate of Peter Thiel, who has massively invested in his companies, if you are not serving the system. You don't have a government or Pentagon contract for the Starshield Global Surveillance Low Orbit Satellite Network if you are not serving the system. And the system wants civil war across the world. Wake the up, people. David Icke was responding to Elon Musk's video urging British citizens to fight for the future. But if history is any guide, billionaires like Musk do not serve public interest or do anything that might in any way benefit you and me. They live for themselves, fight for themselves, and sure as hell don't care about anything else. Wake up, people, before it is too late and the world is plunged into complete chaos. In that world, their tools of absolute control and dominance will be complete, and we will all be fully enslaved. The truth is, none of this changes unless ordinary people stop shrugging it off and start pushing back. Don't let them normalize your surveillance, your silence, and your submission. Share this video, talk about it, question everything they tell you is for your safety, and refuse to hand over your freedom in exchange for false promises. Because if we sit back and wait, it won't just be our rights on the line, it'll be our future, our children, and every shred of dignity left. This is the fight of our lives, and the time to act is now. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the hidden networks shaping our world.